Hello, everyone. Hi, and welcome to another Q&A for the 25th Annual San Francisco Independent Film Festival 2023. We're very fortunate to have a couple filmmakers here with us for the film Rough Edges. Hey, guys.
Hey,
Jason?
And we may have the other actress, Phoebe, join us at one point. We're hoping so. She's fixing Wi-Fi issues. Is that correct?
That's right.
And real quick, guys, just introduce yourselves to the audiences, what role you were in this movie and where you're calling from.
I'm Charles Lyons. I'm the writer and director of Rough Edges, and I'm currently in Montclair, the Oakland Hills.
Cool. And Timothy?
yeah, I'm Timothy, and I played Robert in the production. Helped with casting a little bit.
Oh, you did.
Yes.
Well, we'll talk about casting. So, quite an exceptional film. Let's start with the basic question: how did it come to be, Charles? You're the writer-director, right? Why this film, and how did it start?
Two ideas that kind of came together. I knew I wanted to tell a story about the early tentative stages of a relationship where you're still getting to know each other and you're not sure, is this person someone I can trust? Is this person a good match for me? Do I want to continue to get to know this person and continue in this relationship? Because I feel like that uncertain phase is one that a lot of us experience, but I don't feel like it gets shown a lot. We tend to sort of skip over that. And then I was looking for a way to make it more distinctive and a little more interesting than just the standard boy meets girl kind of thing. And I also noticed that I hadn't really seen alternative sexuality or non-traditional relationships or kink, those things portrayed in what I would consider a respectful way. It was almost always pathologized. The woman was a femme fatale. The character had been abused as a child. It was, these were indications of some kind of severe mental health issue. They were a serial killer, et cetera. And the best case scenario was that it was just ridiculed. It was, it was a joke. Like, look at these ridiculous people doing these ridiculous things.
Yeah,
and none of that tracked with,
exaggerated, if you will.
yeah, and not realistic. It didn't track with what I saw in my experience in the real world, and didn't match what my friends were experiencing. And it doesn't really match. Like, the research has shown that people who are into these things are actually just as healthy or even healthier than vanilla people, probably because they have the tools for talking about this stuff. So this popular conception of these people as serial killers or severely damaged individuals just doesn't hold up. And when I put those two together, I was like, okay, that's a way to tell a story about this early, uncertain, liminal phase of a relationship that is a pretty universal thing, but put a different spin on it. So we're seeing it from an angle we haven't maybe seen before.
Yeah. And Timothy, I welcome you to join in anytime and converse, and you guys can ask each other questions as well. What did you think about the material, Timothy, when you first were introduced to it or approached it? How did you come to the project?
Yeah, well, it came to me at a time. It was about the second year of my professional acting career, and it came to me in a time where I was really kind of coming to terms with my own kind of sexual trauma, not necessarily my own, but the indirect, happening to a family member. So I was really in the conversation of how can we have healthy conversations about sex and intimacy so that never happens again. And I was digging into that. I was in a leadership program at the time and also auditioning for projects. And this project, it just came to me at like the perfect time. And it introduced to me the lifestyle, the BDSM lifestyle, which, from afar, I just thought, oh, that's just where people like pain and like to whip each other. And, I knew so little about it. I knew like what the culture, and I didn't even watch 50 Shades of Grey, which Charles in the audition called it 50 Shades of Shit. And I was like, oh, I like that point of view. So yeah, I auditioned for it and I was like, oh, I just would love this role because as an actor, I'm a vessel for transformative storytelling, and this was the perfect way to transform the world with storytelling.
Yeah, well said, both of you. And I'm by no means approved, but this was stretching my viewing boundaries a little bit, and I did enjoy the topics, the conversations that were in the script that the characters had. I mean, they talked about everything. It was very interesting conversation. I love that, and it's probably like you said, Charles, healthier. And I almost wish I was able to talk that freely and succinctly to my mate. Talk about that right in the script, Charles, and maybe acting those lines out, Timothy.
Well, first of all, I think that the vanilla people could learn a lot from kink, even if you're not interested in doing these things. I think a lot of the structure around negotiating what's in bounds and what's out of bounds and what kind of experience you want to have is the kind of thing that I think a lot of people would benefit from. And I see a lot of stories in the news about dates gone wrong and sexual assault that was maybe due to a misunderstanding or bad communication or so on. And I think wouldn't solve all these problems, but in a lot of cases, people could avoid these situations if they just knew how to talk about this stuff. And I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about it because they don't know how, they don't have the experience, they don't have the tools, they don't, or they're just worried that talking about it is somehow going to ruin the moment or spoil they don't want to derail things by saying, hey, let's negotiate. So I think this stuff is useful to people who aren't in this world. And in the same way that I think that monogamous people could also learn a lot from non-monogamous, ethically non-monogamous people, even if they don't want to do those things, because again, it's about the negotiation and knowing what you want and what your boundaries are and understanding what your partner wants and what their boundaries are. And I think a lot of relationships would be stronger if we were all having these conversations. In terms of writing the script, it was a fine line between, I wanted to portray things hopefully in a natural, believable, organic way that sounded like people really talk. But I knew that I needed to talk about things that a lot of the audience probably weren't going to be familiar with. And there's a fine line there between, I didn't want to fall into the inside joke kind of the story that's just for the little niche subculture where the people who are from that subculture watch it and go, oh yeah, it's just like that. Oh my, that's just like my experience. And anybody outside of that is lost. But I also didn't want to go into the sort of after school special public service announcement kind of educational film where it's just like, the character saying, so as you know, I'm now going to explain a technical term that you already are very familiar with so that the audience that is not watching us, because we're totally not in a movie, knows what we're talking about. So
it was very natural. The script and the dialogue was very natural. I mean,
good.
Well done.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything else, Charles? I was just going to chime in with
go ahead.
Dialogue. I mean, it's written from Charles's wide breadth of knowledge of the material of the BDSM lifestyle, and that's given by not only his experience with it, but also like his, the books. You gave me so many books. You gave me like a huge stack of books to research and read for the movie, just to kind of acclimate myself and really implant the material into my psyche. And what I took from that, there's this book called The Heart of Dominance, which I was reading this, and someone might see that in a bookstore and say, oh, that's for people who are interested in the kink lifestyle. But after I read it, I thought, this book needs to be read by young men. It needs to be assigned to young men. And why I think that is because I think our culture conditions young men to be the dominant ones, or somehow, and one could argue biologically, I'm not even going to bring that up right now, but I think culturally we're conditioned to assume the dominant role. And I think if young men read books like this, or even, I don't know, eventually saw this movie, or just like it learned about that lifestyle, learned about the communication and the use of boundaries, and like Charles said, like the tools, then we would have less dates gone wrong, or less sexual and intimate transgressions. And so that's, I mean, the dialogue really adapted that, his knowledge of that, while not, while still like not having us explain it to the audience.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Very truthfully done. And is a lot of this drawn from experiences, Charles, or how much of it is pulled from your life?
It's a mix. some of it is stuff I experienced, some of it is stuff I saw other people experience or heard about other people experiencing. Some of it's completely made up.
I mean, a lot of the dialogue for it's common, not common, but standard relationship dialogue, comments, conversations that couples go through. I recognized, even though I don't participate in BDSM, I recognized all the topics. Sexual preferences, marriage, children, parenting, drug use. I mean, I've had those conversations.
Yeah, I was kind of going through when I was structuring the story. I was kind of going through like a subverted or like off kilter or left field take on this the standard again boy meets girl kind of thing, and there are a set of sort of stages or steps you go through of progressive disclosure and topics to cover and so on, and so I was consciously trying to go through that evolution of their relationship, but with a twist.
Yeah, well, I actually the twist at the end, if you will, for me was nice, but also I was bummed for them, because they were so truthful and authentic, and I was like, they're gonna work, they're gonna make it. So, but
yeah,
I like that it wasn't a Hollywood ending, if you will.
Right. Well, I'm glad it surprised you. I'm sorry, just it
But just because I was rooting for him.
Right. Sure. No, that's great. That's good. I was rooting for him too. I wrote a bunch of different endings, and I actually did try really hard to find a way to give it a happier ending. And partly because, like, I know in the queer space, for a long time, it was just standard course that the relationships in those stories always ended tragically. Lesbian stories, gay stories, and so on. They for not just decades, they always had these very tragic endings, and it took a while before the acceptance level was high enough and people were brave enough or comfortable enough or whatever to start telling stories where they actually lived happily ever after or had more positive outcomes. So I did try to find a happier ending, but it just made sense this way, and and that's kind of ultimately the point of the story, is that sometimes you can do things right and try your hardest and it still doesn't work.
Well, yeah, kind of like I think a friend was trying to tell Timothy's character, it's like better to have loved and lost than not loved at all, kind of thing, right? And
Right.
she's like, it was a waste of time. Why do we even? It's like, yeah, that was a sweet moment.
Thanks.
Yeah, luckily the character. What was the character's name for Timothy? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, it was Robert. Robert, and even though I think it's easy to see it as like the disappointing story of and I felt disappointed when I watched it again. I thought, oh, I really wanted them to work out, but I think ultimately it is he wins in a way. It's a movie about the relationship with his own vulnerability as much as it is a relationship about a movie about the relationship between two people. And I think at the end he starts to see that yes, this whole time he was with someone, but I don't know if he was in the relationship by opening up, by really like opening up to her and bearing his soul. I think he was still kind of holding back, and it ultimately blew up in his face at the end.
Yeah, I see that too, and that you get the feeling that he's gonna grow. After this movie, he's gonna advance. He's gonna be a better person in a relationship after this.
Yeah, because there's that glimmer of hope at the end, and the what was the name of that center? The Sexual Health Center, or the Sexual
Center for Sex and Culture.
Center for Sex and Culture. Yeah, he's at the seminar and listening and really absorbing what the woman's saying about, like, you have to, yeah, you got to open up. And I think that the film's also about his relationship with power and control. And when Kate is not responding to him, it's like, he's like, wait a minute, I thought I had the power and the control of this relationship. So I think seeing through that lens, beyond just the relationship with two people, I think audiences can take even more from it.
Right, agreed. Now, and this film is, it's very brave and bold. So, amazing achievement. Timothy, when you got the material, like, Was this unexpected? Did you know what you're getting into? I have some kind of interviews where, where there's sex scenes that aren't in the script or they're in the script. So the actors are either thrown, they're surprised or they're not surprised. How did this work out for you as far as the intimate scenes?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I didn't know too much about it going in. I thought, oh, I thought in the beginning it was like, oh, it's a film like a Richard Linklater kind of walk and talk, just dialogue. But when the intimate scenes came up, I was like, honestly, I wasn't afraid. I was like, yes, this is. I want to tell these types of stories. I want to be in intimate scenes. I want to be the vessel for that to transform audiences' perspectives. So it was it was kind of a surprise, but it was a pleasant surprise. I was like, oh, great. I get to be, I get to go there. I get to have the challenge of, being an actor and telling story through these scenes. And I think what Charles did so well and what he choreographed so well is scenes that were not just simply gratuitous and just for his pleasure or even the audience's pleasure. It was like, no, we need to build up, they're building up to, it's kind of these scenes, these intimate scenes are milestones of their relationship versus just.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the filmmaking, Charles and Timothy. I'm a filmmaker, but never, shot a sex scene. What was it like on set? How did you accomplish this?
Well, first of all, I should clarify, when Tim says he was surprised, he means he was surprised when he read the script.
I got it. Yeah,
exactly. It wasn't like we shot up that day and I was like, okay, by the way, we're not shooting the ice cream shop scene today. We're doing sex.
Charles communicated very, right at the beginning that we were going to do very intimate scenes. Yeah, I wasn't surprised on the day of. Good.
Wait, we're kissing today? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very upfront. I told people right off the bat that we're going to be dealing with some sensitive material, and there's going to be nudity, and it's going to be very frank. And I'm not going to do the thing where the potted plant follows the person around to strategically block parts of their anatomy. And
was that always in the script?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I get frustrated. It throws me out of a story if I'm watching a story that seems pretty realistic and compelling, and I'm engaged in what's happening with the characters, and then we get to a sexy scene, and it either feels like we suddenly jumped into late night softcore porn channel, or it's just not an organic part of the story, or they do this weird kind of, they get really shy about stuff, and they have people doing things that I don't see people doing in real life, where they somehow don't take their clothes off when any normal person would, and so on.
You get taken out of the movie. It's fun.
Yeah, it just feels really artificial, and it feels skittish. It feels like cowardly, frankly. So I wanted it to be an organic part of the story, and I wanted it to just sort of happen naturally, in a way that was, again, like everything, like hopefully the whole rest of the story felt like this. I wanted it to be naturalistic and organic and just be completely immersive. And I found it taking a very matter-of-fact approach. It doesn't, acting like it's some touchy taboo thing, kind of frames it in a way that makes it harder to talk about and address honestly. So I was very upfront with the actors, and I wanted to be sure coming in that the people I was casting, and not just the actors, but the crew, were people who are going to be very comfortable and not be awkward and childish or
right. Yeah, not to get film nerdy right now, but how big was your crew when you're doing around any given day?
Well, that was the other thing. We shot with a very, very small crew intentionally, and for any scenes that had any kind of intimacy, nudity, anything like that, it was a closed set. Very small crew, and the only people who were actually on set were the people who were essential. So I also shot it. So I would be there with the camera. You'd have the actors, and you'd have the sound people. And I think in some cases we even had the boom operator would be in the room, but the sound recordist might be in the next room in a couple of cases. But we kept it as small as possible. I also made a point, not just for this reason, but my co-producer and I made a point to have as close to gender parity as we could. So we had my co-producer was female, and we had as many female crew members as we could. So it wasn't exactly 50-50, but it was pretty close most of the time.
Right.
Because I didn't want that kind of bro energy going on. And then, like I said, I picked when I hired people for the crew. I part of the conversation was feeling them out about whether or not they could be mature and respectful about this stuff, and just kind of go in my gut about, like, do I feel like this person would be a safe person to be around?
And Timothy, I'm sorry, but was this on those points to Charles? Was this, did he create those atmospheres? Was it a safe environment and you felt comfortable? And
Absolutely. It'd be kind of weird if I said no right now.
Right, true.
Well, but I want you to be honest.
I know, right? No, it was he.
Have you ever done something this
No, this is the first time I shot, these kinds of intimate scenes, and it wasn't just intimacy. It wasn't just kissing and pretending to have sex. It was beyond that. It was the flogging and those, like with the flogger, that was the most terrifying thing. Still, I had practiced several, I put several hours of practice in before the movie in preparation, because I didn't want to harm Phoebe, my co-star, and I really wish she was here to add her own 2 cents about this. But my God, yeah, we were in the dungeon. I forget the name of the dungeon in Oakland, but we were at that place, and he was shooting the scene, and it was like after he said rolling, I thought, okay, we've rehearsed this, but I'm still. I mean, that was one of the most terrifying moments of my acting career, because I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to harm Phoebe by, slipping and accidentally, hitting her genitals or hitting somewhere that would really like have us have to stop the production. So yeah, it felt like a lot of pressure. And at the same time, the crew and Charles put me at ease, and they're like, you got this. They had the confidence, which gave me the confidence. Sometimes as an actor, you can be on sets where the filmmakers don't have confidence, and that just like you need to feel safe. You need to feel like taken care of. And Charles and the crew took care of us very, very well in those moments of I was just feeling like pure fear. And it's funny because some people might say I was most afraid when there were people around. I didn't mind people. I'm a little bit of an exhibitionist, so when it came to like the nude scenes, I'm like, I love to be naked. But when it came to that, using that tool that I was still new to, I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're at least on screen, your chemistry seems very natural and very relaxed and believable. So I almost could have answered that question myself. That was it comfortable because you guys worked well. How was your working relationship? I wish Phoebe was here. Hopefully, she's going to get on. How was your working relationship with her? How was working with her on the movie?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better co-star. She's so good at screen acting. She really has an understanding of the camera and how to cheat to it. I mean, that's one thing I really learned from her, even though, I was teaching some acting classes at that point, but I still learned from her. So she was just the perfect person for that role. And our relationship, our friendship just grew stronger and grew deeper by the end of it. And yeah, I couldn't have asked for a better co-star.
Because I mean, also, it's challenging. You guys were, you worked hard. You were during pretty much the whole movie for the most part. So you're busy. Both of you were busy working a lot.
Yeah, we were very busy, and she showed up. Her and I both showed up, and I think that's what's most important is you show up, you're ready. There wasn't a day where she was not prepared, didn't have her lines down. It was just like, I'm working with a professional here, and felt like a breath of fresh air to work with a true professional and someone that passionate about the material like I was.
Yeah, Charles, did you match them up before you said the final decision? Like, did you rehearse?
As part of it, we did multiple auditions for multiple stages of audition with our candidates. Partly because of the material, and partly because I wanted to, I paired them off and to see how they felt together, because you can't just cast the individual person, you have to cast them in context to the other people they're interacting with. And yeah, Phoebe did a phenomenal job. And her part's crucial to the film working, and she was committed and really became that character in a way that was all I could have hoped for. She was amazing.
Yeah, you kind of got most of the work done, as they say, as Hitchcock, whoever says, in your casting process, you nailed it on the casting.
In the audition process, I had auditioned with several other women, and Phoebe was the one where, even though we had a great working relationship, there still felt like some stickiness or like differences in points of view. So part of me after she left was like, man, there's some tension there. I don't know if I liked her. I hope Charles cast someone who it's a little bit easier to get along with, in terms of not personally, but like in terms of the characters. But
Right.
you know what? It was like the perfect. I was like, oh, it's the perfect match, because there was like this real visceral tension between us.
Yeah, good job, Charles. Like I said, that was probably the hardest lifting, if you will.
Sorry.
How long was the shoot? Because then these two actors are doing how many days of shooting together?
I forget the exact number. I think it was about a month and a half.
Wow.
Toward the end, we were sort of spacing it out because of people's schedules and trying to line stuff up. So it was a little more spread out. Yeah, you hear about productions doing 18-day shoots and stuff, and in some ways I wish I'd picked an easier one location, smaller cast, etc. But we had a lot of different locations, and we just needed to see more of that world. I didn't want to stay in one room. And I made a point. I know there's a lot of stories in the film industry of people working 15, 16-hour shifts and 6-day weeks, and there's definitely this sort of gung-ho kind of like it's a badge of courage that you did a production where you worked 100-hour week. I think that's idiotic. It's dangerous. It's why people keep dying. It's why people make bad mistakes and like put bullets in guns that shouldn't have bullets. And it's also stupid just from a rational, completely selfish point of view, in that people's productivity and the quality of their work drops off precipitously after 8 or 10 hours. So if you're paying someone overtime or double overtime to work an insanely long shift, you're paying a lot more money and you're not even getting their best work. So to me, it just makes a lot more sense to send everybody home, start again the next day when everyone's fresh, and you're going to get better work from everyone. People aren't going to be burned out. And yes, it'll take a little more time, but you're actually you're not even spending more money to do that because you're not paying all the crazy overtime.
Right on. Here. But on that note, you were working hard as DP, director, maybe even editor. I'm not sure. So
Yes.
How challenging was that? And then I want to hear how Timothy, like the way he thought about you being director, DP. Was that a distraction?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because I definitely got some pushback from other people early on. Not aggressively, but just like, because that's just not the way people generally do it.
Pushback how? Like you got to divide, you got to give a role to the.
Yeah, like people saying, you probably want to have another person handling the camera. And I knew that I wanted a really small crew. And in retrospect, I'm kind of amazed at how much we got done with how small our crew was. Because I've seen movies where the list of producers or the list of PAs or the list of, one small department is bigger than our entire crew. But I had really good people working with me. The other reason I did it was I wanted to have as direct a connection between me and what was happening in the scene. And I wanted as little additional layers. So I wanted to feel directly involved so it's just me and the camera and the actors as much as possible. And I felt like having to tell another person what I was looking for and then look at the results, and that whole thing just would add extra layers of indirectness and disconnection. Yeah,
Timothy, I bet you're using more traditional sets where there's a director of photography, there's a director, separated. And have you had a situation like this before, and how did it go?
Have I had it before on other film sets before? Where yeah, I have, and it hasn't worked out because you have the director not you have the director who's the DP not focusing on the performance, and that's one of the things that really gets to me. And that on other sets that I've worked on, with the director is just solely focused on it looking good rather than the moment being truthful and believable. I think I mean, as an actor, I'm always going to advocate for truth.
Right.
I think Charles did a really great job of kind of switching back and forth, and he used minimal equipment too, which I think helped too. If he was handling bigger equipment, I would have been maybe more concerned, like, oh gosh, but it was just kind of a run and gun kind of guerrilla style film. But we had great sound, great lighting, but it was pared down so that he was actually able to focus on the performances. And ultimately, it just reminded me of shooting films with friends, where you're like, you're
Yeah.
offering them performance notes while you're just slightly adjusting the frame. And this is a story about relationship. It's not like we were doing fancy camera moves. There's no jib or crane or so it allowed for Charles to put on.
Yeah. It's like true indie filmmaking, and also
I have a thought. It didn't occur to me until just now, but we were just talking about having the intimate set and so on, and part of that is getting the actors to forget that there's a crew there and there's a camera there and so on. And I wasn't thinking of this consciously when I chose to shoot it this way, but I think by doing it this way, it kind of downplayed the role of the camera in the thing. Like, I wasn't treating the camera as my primary focus. I was treating the camera just as a tool to record what we were doing. And maybe by me sort of treating the camera as just kind of a thing that's happens to be in the room. I don't know, Tim, you can tell me if this is true or not, but maybe that contributed to sort of reducing some of the pressure or tension in the room, or making it a little more relaxed.
Oh yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah, it was like the camera was. I mean, it was what was the Sony FX?
The main camera was a Blackmagic
Blackmagic,
Mini, and then our B camera for car stuff and outside stuff and so on was the Sony A7R II.
It felt like, yes, something that was more capturing the moment, kind of in the room with us, versus like huge apparatus that were having to do all this technical work to.
So it was almost advantageous, without you kind of knowing from the start, to be multiple roles, Charles. And you got a lot of shots too. I mean, it's expansive. I never feel claustrophobic or one room kind of indie, limited budget kind of movie.
Good.
It's multiple locations, multiple neighborhoods. It feels big. You created a world.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah. How was it shooting in San Francisco? Any challenges?
Not really. I think in some ways we would have had a harder time if we were in LA, or a city that's much more filmed out. Because in LA, if you tell someone you're shooting a movie, they're like, "Yeah, so is my nephew. So fucking what?" And here, we had a couple places turn us down. We were looking for location stuff, but I was actually really pleasantly surprised at how many of the people we talked to were just immediately like, "Yeah, come in on the day off. You can, pay the bartender to come in and unlock for you, and that's all you have to do. Or,
Cool.
We'll stay late after closing, and you can shoot the scene then." Or what? Like, people were just very welcoming and accommodating and helpful. And so we got to shoot in a lot of interesting, varied locations that I think is a nice sort of journey through San Francisco. And outside of San Francisco, we don't see that often. And these locations have a lot of character and personality to them.
Yeah.
Added a lot to the film. And I'm very happy with what we were able to get and how helpful people were.
Yeah. Just a couple more questions. I can keep talking to you guys for a lot longer. This is really enjoyable. And speaking of that, some other cool spots, great shots made from Potrero Hill, Bernal Heights. What was the bar with the naughty decor? Was that a real bar?
Yeah, that was Homestead,
Homestead, okay.
which is
Cool.
in
Mission,
Mission.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
And they had the perfect back room for that with the paintings and stuff. The artist, I was able to track down the artist because I needed to get the rights to the paintings, and the artist is deceased, but his son and his granddaughter were able to give me the rights to use those paintings, and they were wonderful. They were
and all those locations are real locations.
yeah.
So they'll be in the credits if people want to check them out.
Oh yeah, there's a whole list. Unfortunately, a couple of the restaurants have closed, so there's a little RIP next to ones. But I was worried, especially with the pandemic, that we'd lose more of them, and I'm sad that we lost the ones we did. But I'm glad the list wasn't longer. But yeah, I was very careful to make sure they all get called out in the credits.
Yes, right on. And since we just have a little more time, do you guys want to add anything I didn't ask you, or I can give you a question like, do you have a takeaway from this experience? What you maybe learned or want some audience member to take away from it? Tim, I'll start with you.
Sure. I loved it. I love that it was my job. I love doing feature films because it's your job. It's not like I do a lot of commercials and, it's my bread and butter for now. And that's just a 1 or 2 day thing. And then it's more about looking good you're serving the product. But for feature film storytelling, it's like, no, we're so immersed in the world and in the character and the scenario that the writer, director has created. So I loved it. I wish I could do it every day. I think I would hope that audiences take away from this, that we need to see more stories like this. We need to support more stories like this that are digging into different perspectives of intimacy and sex that we're not getting, that are challenging the norm.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Well said. Charles, last words.
Well, it's a big relief to finally be showing it to people. It's been a long, difficult road, but it's been, and when you're in the bowels of post production, you don't always know if what you're doing makes sense or is gonna land. So it's been very gratifying to get feedback from people who've seen it and connected with it, and clearly we're paying attention and respond to things or point out things that I was hoping would come across. It's nice to hear that had that echoed back or mirrored back. And I've had people who are familiar with this world and this scene tell me that they're really glad to see it represented in a way that felt fair and realistic and honest to them, to sort of see themselves or their friends on screen, and that's been really good to hear, to know that the people most familiar with this feel like they were, shown honestly. But also it's been nice. I've had people who are very far outside of this scene, who have no personal experience with it, who probably don't have any interest in entering this world themselves, who also have come up and said they really connected with it, and they cared about the characters and were really curious to see how the story can play out. And that's also really nice to hear, because I wanted to make a story about people who I feel have been overlooked and misrepresented, but I didn't want to make it just for one small group. I was hoping to find, from this unconventional angle, to find a universal story that people would recognize and respond to. And so it's nice to get that too.
Yeah. Well, it's those are a compliment, a testament to your achievements in this movie.
Thanks.
Yeah, and to your performance, Timothy. So, and Phoebe's performance. Tell her we missed her. And well done, guys. Congratulations, not only on making this movie. I know filmmaking's a hard thing to do in and of itself, but getting into our film festival. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
And we'll see you at the movies and in the after party.
Great.
All right. Ciao.